Distilling insights from data is key to successful business outcomes. But even with today's automation and speed, IT and business leaders often struggle with repeated tasks and resource intensive processes in an effort to generate useful insights from that data. Now, these processes can include querying thousands of files and data sets, converting text to structured query language, or SQL, SQL as we call it, data quality assessment, and analysis. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Malone. I'm a senior content strategist with CIO Marketing Services, and we're delighted you can join us for this timely and informative session. Now, in this webcast from Amazon Web Services and featuring Calent, an AWS Premier Tier partner, you'll learn how Idenix, a data solutions company, uses generative AI as a force multiplier, abstracting away time-consuming tasks to focus on analyzing data and providing customers with insights and improving employee and customer experiences. We've got a great session lined up for you today, so let's meet our speakers without further ado. So first up, let's say hello to Jake Langenkamp, who's the CEO of Idenix. Hi, Jake. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about Idenix and your role there.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. So my role, I am the CEO and founder of Idenix. We're a small data aggregation and analysis startup. We founded the company in 2020. Prior to that, I spent a couple of decades in public service in the U.S. government. I was active duty military and then a civilian for the government. Spent a lot of time overseas, and because of that, we leveraged that experience of doing business throughout the world, especially the developing world, to help American companies navigate that space, which is usually a kind of foreign space for them of understanding how to do business in emerging markets. And so because of that, as you can imagine, there's a lot of data involved and a lot of hard to procure data and a lot of hard to parse data, which is what brings us here to this project.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jake. Welcome. We're looking forward to your commentary today. Now let's say hello to Randall Hunt, who's VP of Technology with Calent. Hey, Randall, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your role at Calent.
Hi, folks. My name is Randall, and I'm VP of Technology. And what my role at Calent is to jump into exciting new technology and make sure Calent is at the forefront of it. So that involves things like leveraging generative AI and leveraging the latest AWS feature releases. So reInvent around November is always a very fun time of year for us when we get to play with all the new toys from AWS.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Randall. Really looking forward to your commentary as well. Now, before we get started, I have for our audience just a quick tip to get the most out of today's session, and that is that resources section you see on your player. There you'll find lots of great resources and assets from our speakers today on this topic that you can download, share with colleagues, prospects, clients, etc. And finally, a big thanks to our sponsor, AWS and Calent, for making today's event possible. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive right in, Jake and Randall. And Jake, I'm going to start with you, and let's start with the before picture. Talk about the technology or business challenge that you wanted to address with this initiative.
Sure. So as I mentioned in my introduction, our specialty is helping customers who spend a lot of time in business ventures in the developing world, whether that's hiring people in an unfamiliar landscape, looking at partnerships that would be really beneficial. But it all boils down to our need to gather as much data on those environments and help it make sense for our customers. So to that end, we do a lot of procurement, whether they're publicly available data sets or we negotiate large scale procurements from data aggregators in those countries. But as you can imagine, there's quite a bit of variance in terms of format of those files, languages of those files, and really honestly, it was just kind of a very manual data entry problem because each file had to be opened and manually triaged to figure out what we had. So what that meant was it was painstakingly slow and we had to rely on certain kind of cornerstone foundational data sets to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So we knew that we were leaving a lot on the cutting room floor, which is why we were looking for a solution, which ultimately led us to our work with Kalen.
Excellent. Jake, I want to explore a little bit more about the how in these processes. For example, the processes before this initiative, you mentioned they were manual. Was this something that you thought this is where automation can help us, or talk a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, 100%. So it was a lot of conversations about what we could do from an automation perspective, a lot of one-on-ones with me and my CTO, a lot of, leadership, group talks, because we knew that it was a huge bottleneck for us. At one point, it was estimated that to go through all the files that we had on deck in cold storage, it would take a data entry person years to go through every single one and just identify what language everything was in, what data categories they're filling, whether it's email addresses or names or biographic information about occupation or anything like that. And so, yeah, it was a very painstaking process that we had spent a lot of time as a leadership group discussing how we could remove that bottleneck before we even started the project. We knew, some of the things that could be leveraged for those automation goals, but I think that we lacked the in-house expertise to leverage that just us. Even if we had the expertise, our CTO is incredibly intelligent. It was also a matter of bandwidth, of having the time to be able to research what the right solution was, and then the free time to engineer the implementation.
Excellent, thanks. And then let's get Randall involved in the conversation. Randall, and then Kaylin gets involved in this initiative. Talk a little bit about the beginning of this engagement with IDENX.
Sure. So, Jake, would it be fair to say that the problem was taking large disparate sets of data that represent emerging economies, taking that data and turning it into signal?
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that I undersold there, Randall, that you guys were keenly aware of when we started this was just the problem that comes with having large amounts of unstructured data. So it was just kind of all over the place in terms of the structure and composition of how it looked.
We talked about the idea of taking both unstructured, semi-structured, and structured data and being able to perform some sort of analysis on them. But I think the initial problem that you were facing was, oh, could we use a managed service like Amazon TextRack to attack a lot of these image-based files or these PDFs and be able to get signal out of those? And I think when we dove into the data, what we found was TextRack, while a valuable service for this particular workload, because of the state of all the semi-structured and unstructured data that was out there, there was an opportunity to go a little bit further and take a generative AI-based approach and workflow where we would analyze the value of the file or the value of the container of the input data, and we would say something to the effect of, this looks like it's a valuable thing. Let's move it through the workflow so that a human data scientist can come in and annotate some of it and determine how much time to dedicate to this. And then all of these aggregators that you were working with, you would be able to start to kind of see very rapidly when they would upload new data, what the immediate value of that data was, as opposed to waiting for it to be done in the queue by a human.
So we, kind of dove headfirst into exploring it with y'all. And as you mentioned, I think we initially, came up with some roadblocks because the initial solution was going to be beneficial, but only for certain things that we were trying to triage for. And by you guys being able to pivot like you did, we were able to make the final solution, extremely agile and more all-encompassing. Really opened the aperture of what we could do. So yeah, I think that's all 100% right.
So one of the things that we do at Kalen is we like to identify the idea and reach the impact. So we'll start with the business level objective, which is improve the efficiency of these files, help us translate this massive data into signal faster. And if we start with that idea, it helps us work backwards from that into the technical deliverables. So I like that we're able to pivot quickly as we stay focused on a particular business goal and bring the right technology at the right time to solve the problems.
Randall, as Kalen's a premier tier partner with Amazon Web Services, I guess AWS was always going to play a role in this engagement. Talk about that role.
So Identix, and we work with a lot of different customers in virtually every vertical and space you could imagine. And one of the things that I love about startups and companies that are willing to lean in on new technology is that you typically end up working alongside and with passionate technologists who really want to leverage the best case, and they don't want to just buy some commercial off the shelf solution and have it magically work, except then several years down the road you're paying a ton of money to some vendor. What they like to do is they want to understand their technology and own it and operate it, but also lean in with the latest and greatest. And Bedrock at the time was the latest and greatest. So we had this opportunity with IDNX to get them added into the preview for Bedrock, where we could try out different generative AI models in the solution. So at the time, the only other offerings out there were OpenAI and the Google Vertex AI service or the Azure OpenAI service were not generally available yet, and you weren't able to kind of pick and choose different models. You were stuck with just the OpenAI model or whatever model the Vertex AI team had made. Whereas with Bedrock, we could go in, we could try a number of different models, and I believe we arrived at Anthropic Claude 2. And then I think we moved it to Anthropic Claude 2.1 shortly after that. But we arrived at that model after doing sort of what we would call an eval. And an eval is a programmatic loop and a human evaluated loop where you will take the prompt of your large language model and you will feed it through with lots and lots of test cases, and you will grade the output of it. And as you change the prompt, you rerun the evals to see if the quality of the results of the resulting inference is improving. And this is the way we approach pretty much any generative AI engagement at this point. But IDNX was early to the game, so it was fun to experiment with them. And I do think there's probably a lot of opportunity as these models change to kind of leverage the framework that we built on top of AWS, but leverage newer and more robust models.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, Randall, is that it was actually through that initial testing that we found that Anthropic, specifically Claude, worked best with prompt engineering for other automations that we were trying to do with our data. That it was at the time, and I think still our opinion, that it does the best job of being able to generate smart prompt engineering that can query the schemas that we're using. And so we're still using Claude. We're using Claude 3 now.
But also, what's interesting is we talk a lot about, when we talk about AI and data, we talk about kind of getting your data in good shape before you can run the AI processes, et cetera. Here, you're using AI to get that data into good shape, which is interesting. Flips the script a little bit. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so using AI as that kind of triage tool in this case is incredibly impactful because it really cuts down the amount of manual time even needed to decide if this was something that was worth it, because we're building data sets, curated data sets according to what our customers need, based on geography, based on business sector that they're looking at, all those types of things. So every time that we're building a client specific data set, it's different. So that triage aspect is incredibly impactful.
Let's continue with that thread, Jake, and talk about the results. Let's walk our viewers through some of the top line results. And let's start with you, Jake.
Yeah, so I mean, it really did, that initial process, because usually if we get a new client, we spend a lot of time thinking about what it is that they care about, both by geography, the type of businesses that they're looking at, or the type of individuals that they might be looking to hire or partner with, or things like that. So it it really sped up that initial process by orders of magnitude, because instead of having our like niche cornerstone data sets that we talked about earlier of like, hey, we found this really, really good sub-Saharan, business data set. We know that we're going to include that. Each time that we're kind of building something that was client specific, we could go through and use the tool that Kaylin produced for us to really bear down on exactly what it is that we were looking for. We have about 100 terabytes of data in cold storage that we utilize this tool with, that we're then able to really get niche of, so an example would be, we have a American mining company that mines for critical minerals in sub-Saharan Africa. They're active in the DRC, but they were also looking for expansion in places like Nigeria, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya. So we were then able to use Kaylin's tool to go in and just query by certain languages. It allows us to go out and be way less selective on the data that we're pulling in, because we can almost kind of cudgel it all in, knowing that, like, hey, if this is all a bunch of sub-Saharan African data, like we're not creating extra work for somebody. We can just utilize this tool to immediately, hone in on the signal that we're looking for. So it would be hard to underestimate the time-saving impact on the front end of these kind of niche projects that we're doing in various parts of the world.
Excellent. And Jake and Randall, but start with you again, Jake. Can you talk a little bit about the business outcomes, thinking of things like competitive advantages, even the customer experience? What have you experienced there?
Yeah, so we already pride ourselves on being able to answer questions in very niche parts of the world. The difference, though, is that the amount of time that we can give answers to clients has dramatically shortened, because of our ability to ingest that data and find the right answers to build the right data lake for our clients. So I'm sure the quality has gone up, but really what has increased quite a bit is the speed at which we can operate and give solutions for our clients. Obviously, that's better for our clients. They're usually willing to, pay for, a faster result. But in terms of us, we're spending less manual analytic man hours, diving through data to find the right stuff, and then just providing answers to our clients like much faster.
That's excellent. Also, Jake, earlier on, you touched on some of the maybe unforeseen benefits. So, talk a little bit how this project is with specific reference to Gen AI. How is that evolving or impacting IDENX corporate strategy, or is it?
No, so it is very much. I always say that the prompt engineering that we can do with some of these LLMs, when you look at it retrospectively, it doesn't seem like rocket science, but that's kind of its power, is that a lot of the heavy lifting is done for you, and it allows a small startup like us to really punch above our weight. And since that time, I would say that as powerful as the Canaan solution was for us, the vast majority of automation that we've undertaken since that time has been organic, like internal to the team, but it allowed us to think through, okay, what else can we, solve that seemed like a really heavy lift, but maybe through just a little bit of prompt engineering and utilization of some of these tools like Claude, can we really make a seemingly insurmountable problem, not that big of a deal?
Something I advise all of our clients to do, and the way that I talk about prompt engineering with, everyone, including our internal team, is that it starts out a little bit like mad science. You're just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. Once you have something that's working, you have to switch into the scientific method and experimental mode, and you have to get into programmatic evaluation of changes to these prompts. And I think when you build that organizational muscle memory to reach for generative AI for these solutions, you can really accelerate what you're able to do. And I love that IDNX is able to do that now.
Yeah, and to that point, Randall, it's fun to watch, our team, especially our CTO, look at this like a Sudoku puzzle that he's constantly trying to solve. It was the Kalent project, which was the first one which we really kind of started thinking through that and realizing that for the heavy lift, for the really technical things, it's great to have a partner like Kalent that we can do that with. But some of these things we can do internally, and it can just be a living, breathing animal that we're evolving, some of the automation tools that we're developing in house through that iterative process, like I mentioned.
And I love that, one of the things we always do at Kalen is we work with, we don't work for. So I'm glad that we were able to get your team started down that path and that you're continuing to develop things without us even. That's great. That's what we want for all of our customers. Being able to leverage generative AI to improve their business is music to my ears.
Before we move on, Randall, I did want to ask a question about generative AI in general. I want to frame it up with a couple of data points. We see from our partners over at IDC, 90% have made AI investments. About 18% say my data is in good shape for those investments. But 36, 30, maybe even close to 40% are already seeing transformative changes through their AI initiatives. So that's interesting signal and noise there. But my question is, Randall and Jake, what would you tell companies who say, I'm not ready. We're not going to dive into Gen AI yet. What happens to those companies? What would you tell them at this point?
I think there's a huge number of use cases out there that can be quick wins. I know a lot of times you have to convince your board or convince your various stakeholders within your company that this is a valuable investment. And sometimes the easiest way to do that is by showing rather than telling. And so one of the things that we've done for a number of different companies is hop in and say, okay, you have this list of use cases that you would love to apply generative AI to. Uh, the ideal one is to go and attack this problem that's going to have the most ROI, right? That's the first thought. But sometimes, in order to get the continued investment, it's better to attack the smaller, approachable, quick win so that you can take the success of that quick win and use it to build iteratively into the larger engagements and the larger kind of ROI that you want. One, it helps you build that organizational muscle memory and capability to leverage generative AI in-house. And then two, you buy margin in other parts of your business that you can then apply to this larger effort. So I think we've seen a couple of different plays and different customers in the way that they're approaching generative AI. Some people want the quick win. Some people are willing to really lean in and do that big investment to just transform their business.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, it would be hard to envision a technology that has benefited smaller, more agile companies than the explosion of AI and automation in general. I think it really allows a smaller company that can move much faster from a decision-making process to really disrupt the incumbents in their space that spend a lot of time and they equate results with more and more investment dollars, whereas I think you can just get a lot more results by the more reps that you're getting by trying to automate different things. Like you're not going to get a perfect answer every time, but the faster that you can move through those things to where you're going to find the like, hey, eureka moment. This tool works absolutely perfectly for what it is that we're trying to solve.
Thanks, Jake. We've been chatting with Jake Langenkamp with IDNX, Randall Hunt with Kalent. Gentlemen, we only have a couple minutes left for our session today. And before we go, I wanted to give you each a chance just to kind of summarize with kind of an eye to the future It's funny when we talk about AI, we usually talk about the future in 12 to 18-month increments. We're looking further down the road with AI too, just because it's so transformative and the adoption, the trend has been so incredible. But let's think about the future as we think about what we want to leave our listeners and viewers with today. And Jake, let's start with you. Some final thoughts thinking about moving forward with future projects.
Yeah, so I think how you phrase the question, Jim, I remember back 6 months to a year ago where you see this explosion of LLM capability and adoption. You're hearing all these great stories of productivity gains. And for a lot of people, a lot of companies out there, they feel like they're getting left behind because they're like, how do we use this? Like, I know that I'm not doing this. I know that I'm not doing this enough. And so to put a bow on what we were talking about earlier, I think going in, just knowing that it's not as complex integration as you might be expecting, but the better partner that you have, like we had with Kalent, the more that you can own that problem set and not just do the traditional outsourcing, like give it to them, hey, bring it back to us when we're done. Really take an iterative process because that's the more that those light bulbs are going to go off. It's going to be a truly learning, an integrated process. So, I think that we're going to do a lot more projects in the future, not only because of the quality that we get, but because of that, constant iterative, teamwork kind of function. So it would just be, hey, the hardest thing is going from 0 to 1. And once you do that, it's usually a one-way rabbit hole. You just think of other things that you can utilize it for, other projects, and it's really kind of an exponential adoption curve.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jake. Randall Hunt with Kalent. When you think about projects like these, looking ahead to the future, what do you want to leave our viewers with today?
Well, first of all, thanks to Jake for saying all of that. I think we are in a time where some people have ideas and they want to turn those ideas into impact, and sometimes you just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So leveraging a partner like Kalent, we can come in and work with you and be an extension of your team where we're driving towards the same business level objectives. I think when you're thinking about generative AI, remember it's a little bit more than just fancy autocomplete. It's really capable of emergent behavior and really deep kind of tooling and techniques and function calling. And if you want to know if something is able to be done by generative AI or not, you're always welcome to email Kalent or to reach out to your AWS team, and they're pretty willing to jump in and dive deep with you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And with that, gentlemen, unfortunately, that brings us to the close of our session. We've been chatting with Jake Langenkamp with Idenix, Randall Hunt with Kalent. Thanks to you both for your expertise and insights. This has been a great session. And of course, a big thanks to Amazon Web Services for their sponsorship of today's session. Now, before we go, audience, I want to remind you to check out that additional resources section. You'll find contact information there to really take a deep dive there, along with lots of other assets and resources that you can download. And again, take a really good deep dive on this critical topic. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. And with that, for Amazon Web Services, CIO Marketing Services, this is Jim Malone saying, thanks everyone for tuning in.